welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. We knew this day would come, this day when I would sacrifice for the movie nerds. We are going to talk about Snow White. So I did go to the theater to see the new remake live action of Snow White starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot. And I have to tell you, if there are any reviewers out there that are telling you it's not that bad, they have probably taken some money from Disney. They are probably lying to you. Now, I knew that I wasn't going to be over the moon in love with this film. I definitely am in the camp of people that thought that it was very distasteful of Rachel Zegler to come out and basically crap all over the original film. Considering that you are starring in it, you at the very least should enjoy the content that you are remaking, in my opinion. However, for one, I knew that I wanted to do a review for the movie nerds. I wanted to go in and be as fair and as honest as I could. Even if I did not personally enjoy the movie, it's no different to me than, let's say, when I went and saw Moana 2. I did not think that it was amazing, but I could recognize that it was a good children's film. And so for me, that's an easy recommendation, right? If you have kids that are small, that are going to enjoy those types of cartoons, you should definitely bring them. And so I figured at the very least, even if I did not personally enjoy myself at the Snow White live action film, that I could give an honest and fair review of it for those people that have children. A lot of my audience base are people that are roughly the same age as me and probably do have kids. However, going into the Snow White remake, I was aghast at just how terrible this film is, and not from the perspective of this isn't something that a kid could sit down and actually enjoy. Though I will say my theater wasn't sold out by any stretch of the imagination, but there were kids there. There were kids in attendance at the showing that I went to. You could hear a pin drop. There was no excitement. There was no laughter. There was no, that sort of boisterous way that kids get when they are watching cartoons. I'm sure many of you, especially if you have younger children who go to, Moana or go to these Pixar films or cartoons, will notice that your kids kind of can't sit still and they're making noise and they're very excited and they're, they want to sing along or they want to get out of their chairs. None of that happened here. At least not in my showing. All of the kids were dead quiet. And I have to just imagine that is because there were so many elements of this film that felt rather adult, considering that it is a remake of what I would say was a family-friendly but mostly child-oriented film. There are multiple occasions in this where, for whatever reason, the people who were rewriting it decided that interjecting very large, complicated words into a very normal sentence. It reminded me very much of Severance, if anyone watches that television show with Milchek, where he gets reprimanded essentially for using big words that he doesn't need to use. That is exactly what I felt was going on here, where she could have said, we need to clean up and make this place spotless. She would say something just over the top. And with these words in there that I was like, there is not an 8-year-old alive. I mean, unless you have a really nerdy 8-year-old who likes to read the dictionary, which I also did as a child, but that's not the normal child, right? I recognize this. The kids are going to be confused in some parts about what they are talking about. Not only that, but Rachel Zegler does come forward and say, she doesn't need the prince. The prince could be completely cut out of this film. You wouldn't need him. He's not necessary. The parents of Snow White teach her to be fearless, fair, brave, and true. And that's what we're teaching, that you're an independent woman and you don't need no man and you can do whatever. But the entire story here revolves completely around the prince, who in this movie, in this version, is a poor sort of beggar. He's a bandit. He's not a prince. He's someone who's living in the woods. At one point, he loses his pair of shoes and somehow finds another, probably stole them. But she really goes from being a child, having the evil queen take over the kingdom, and she does nothing. She does nothing. It is said in the film that she is sort of treated essentially in how I would imagine Cinderella was treated, right? That is how the evil queen in Snow White treats Snow White, is she's just like cleaning floors and things of that nature, yet her dresses are perfectly hemmed and perfectly clean, and her hair is always perfectly done, and she has very nice shoes, but somehow she's a beggar girl. Makes sense. And then the evil queen, of course, gets to the point where she wants Snow White to go with the hunter to be, unalived in the forest, and he can't do it. But really, all of this is built around her supposedly being this really kind and really sweet, and that's why they can't do anything against her. She's talking about how she's being raised with this empowerment, but she shows zero of it. And her kindness in a lot of the parts of this film is really just judgmental. Like, it's not necessarily kindness so much as she is looking down on people for behaving in a way that she doesn't feel is right. But she has been held up in the castle, treated well, fed well, clothed well, while all of the sort of peasants of the town are literally starving. And she, again, like I mentioned, she doesn't do anything. She doesn't do anything about it until she runs into the prince, and the prince tells her, perhaps you should do something. And then she runs into the seven dwarves. Now, one of the things that really confused me the most about this is I'm not sure if it was a mistake or if this was something that was corrected in a lot of the reshoots and refilming that they did the past year, because obviously this version of Snow White was meant to come out in 2024 and it is out in 2025 instead. But I had heard and had seen some imagery that said, there wasn't going to be the seven dwarves in this film. Obviously there was that whole debacle over Disney not wanting to hire little people to play those roles. And so it was going to be 7 magical creatures, and they had shown an image on the internet. I'm sure some of you have seen it, of just this random group of people that were together, and that was going to be who was helping her. Well, those are not the 7 dwarves in the film. They are a completely separate set of people. They are the extra bandits that are teamed up with what would be in this version our prince, who is just head of the bandits. It's very much Robin Hood and his merry men instead of the 7 dwarves. But the 7 dwarves are also in this. And so you've got both versions of these things. And so I am not sure if Disney's intention was to cut out the 7 dwarves entirely and all of the parts where she was living in their cottage, and instead she would have been living with the prince and his band of merry mates. I am not sure if that's what the refilming was. Certainly the 7 dwarves do not look as though they were intentional. I will say, with one exception, Dopey actually looks decent. I think he is the one that looks the least creepy, the least freakish, but the rest of them definitely look not great. And so I would wager a guess that that was the first intention, was for her to live in the woods with the prince and his band of merry mates instead of going to the cottage and being with the 7 dwarves, which I feel like would have felt that much more removed from the original Snow White. It's very convoluted how the story comes together and why we need both versions of those people in this film. I will say the acting in this also is really bad. Like, I have seen Gal Gadot in quite a few movies, Wonder Woman and some other ones that she has done. I don't think that she is the best actress in the world, but I certainly do not think that she portrays the evil queen in Snow White very well. I would say probably my favorite would be Charlize Theron from Snow White and the Huntsman, if anybody remembers that film. I think that version of the evil queen, as far as like a live action version, was phenomenal. And that's sort of what I was expecting here, but we did not get that. I think that Rachel Zegler also is just a very poor actress She has an exceptional voice. She can sing very well, but she did like so many stank faces in this movie. Like I don't know if it was like she was trying to look sad or trying to look, I don't know, angry or something. And she would just pull these faces that were just, it's like one of those faces where if somebody catches a candid photo of you and you're like, please delete that immediately. That is not the face that I want forever on the internet. She pulls a lot of those faces in this film. And overall, like it is completely missing the core values, that core goodness that the original Snow White had and why the original Snow White has withstood the test of time. Now, I do remember Zegler coming forward and saying, if she's going to spend 18 hours in Snow White's dress, she deserves to be paid for every hour it is streamed online. Well, don't worry, Miss Rachel Zegler. I guarantee you this one is not going to be streamed online all that often. It just misses the mark. I think that people will probably forget about this version of Snow White within a couple of months, and it would not be surprising to me. As far as I can tell, at least in the AMC theaters near me, it is not selling well. People are not going to this film. I don't think that there are even any showings in the theater closest to me that are even half full. It's definitely not going to make its money back. And that is somewhat surprising to me. Like, I knew a lot of people were very angry, but I feel like there was just as much animosity towards the live action remake of The Little Mermaid. But I feel like The Little Mermaid did surprisingly well with audiences. I personally never went to go see that one. I kind of almost want to give it a go now because I cannot imagine it is worse than this one. But Snow White does not seem to be pulling in audiences in the same way. And it's not surprising to me because this is missing really all of the elements that would make it a good, memorable film. I would not even recommend this one to watch at home for streaming. I don't know that this is going to be one that your kids just absolutely love, even if you can't stand it and it breaks your little child heart. Like I really went into this trying to be as fair as I could. And there's so much missing from this live action version. Like I do know that Disney has done live action versions well. The Cinderella version that they did, I think, was good. It was decent. I am hopeful for the Lilo and Stitch film that is coming out pretty soon. That one does not seem like they messed with it quite as much as they messed with this Snow White. So I really cannot recommend this version in all fairness. I tried to give it my best go and I really just disliked this one wholeheartedly. So those are my thoughts on the new Snow White remake. I would love to know what you guys thought of this one. If you have seen it, subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.